stream. I'm going to turn off the thunder because I don't want to be listening to it all day. Apply settings. So the whole point of this stream is just to talk about this character and what this character's meant to me. Kind of similar to when I did the Walking Dead celebration stream, just talking about my favourite memories of The Walking Dead, my initial reactions to Season 11 and the series finale and all that stuff. So this is kind of along the similar lines. I have done a final storyline reaction where, of course, I spoke about Mick Carter's exit and you know, the big Christmas Day stunt, the amazing stunt they did. Fair play. I watched the behind the scenes of that stunt, and it was just absolutely superb. I'm going to turn the music up. Also, just going to quickly sound devices, just chat audio, because otherwise, yeah, becoming harder to navigate. So this character, Mick Carter, obviously, for those who don't know, was played by Danny Dyer on EastEnders, first appearing on Christmas Day 2013, and of course making his final appearance on Christmas Day 2022. Probably one of the first soap characters to both arrive and exit on the same day, so many years apart, which I think is really ironic. It makes the Carter, it makes Christmas time very much a Carter themed, which I for one really enjoy, and I do think that that Christmas Day 2022 will be one of the last Christmases dedicated to the Carters for quite some time, until either Linda has a new story that is obviously probably not the story she's set for this year, which we still don't really know anything about. And yeah, so this character, well, as I said in my initial reaction to his exit, I've been watching EastEnders since I was 11 years old, and the character of Mick Carter had only been in it for a year and a bit by then, because of course I started watching in the February, so it was about a year and 2 months. I started watching into his run, and so in a way I kind of did grow with this character on screen. You know, it was still very much in the height of the first huge issue-based storyline they had, which of course the fallout of Mick finding out that Dean assaulted Linda, and that Dean was his brother and Shirley was his mum and not his sister. So very much the fallout was still, it was good that the Carters, oh wow, that's a very interesting landing. Fair play. It was good that the Carters were also quite central to the anniversary storylines as well, which I will get onto that, because I do think that the Carters are also going to be very, very heavily used in the 40th anniversary story that will be airing in over 2 years away. EastEnders is 38, that is insane. This February would have marked 8 years since I started watching, which just makes me feel old. But yeah, the Carters are, you know, well, have always been my favourite family, and Mick has always been my favourite character, simply because I feel like as a character Mick very much goes against the traditional soap cliches, and this goes all the way back to literally one of his very first episodes, probably into his, you know, just into his second week on EastEnders, and that was of course the ultimate Mick and Johnny Carter scene, where Johnny came out to Mick, and I feel like this scene alone very much shifted it changed a lot for soap, because normally it is the matriarchal character who is on the, you know, the receiving end of the coming out scene, where they are being told that their child is gay or bisexual, or any of the LGBT identities, unsexualities. But no, they took a spin on it. Of course, we've had scenes where gay men have came out to their fathers. For example, Ben and Phil. But I feel like Mick was the very first time where we saw the male truly just accept his son for who he is. And it was a very beautiful scene. The writing was sensational. The acting, in particular, Sam Strike and Danny Dyer, nearly over 9 years on from that scene, still receive letters to this day about how that scene really did help a lot of young gay men come out to their families. And I feel like that scene in particular is so powerful. I'm quite open about this. I am heterosexual. I've been quite certain of that for a long time. It's just who I am. So, I can't exactly relate on a personal note to that scene. But at the same time, I have so much respect, because I do have a lot of friends who are either gay or bisexual or pansexual or just any of them. It's so important to me to see a platform where people I care about can feel represented, and I truly think that that scene in particular does a sensational job at providing that sort of representation to very good people of mine. And yeah, so Danny Dyer and Sam Strike, 9 years on, they have held, in my eyes, one of the most iconic and most memorable heart-to-heart scenes in EastEnders' nearly 40-year history. Following on from obviously that scene, I think that there's other groundbreaking stories the Carters have done, and okay, so down the line they got those stories, the whole Mick and Whitney thing, and Linda and Max, and all these different things. But I feel like the way that the Carters have approached these stories is very unique in themselves. Instead of Mick having a full-on affair with Whitney, he actually resisted. Obviously they shared the two kisses. I hated that storyline, if I'm being honest with you, but I still think Danny Dyer did an excellent job at, because in a sense, it's kind of, looking back, now that Mick's left the show, it does, that storyline from nearly 6 years ago very much does feel in accordance to Mick Carter's character following on from his exit. And what I mean by that is, Mick never loved Janine. I would be safe to say that Mick never loved Whitney. He said he did, but I think it was just the idea of Whitney during that very difficult time where he was away from Linda, and obviously Nancy had a car accident, Lee got into a load of debt, and all the Vic was falling apart. I feel like Mick, in that sense, just lost himself, and the idea of Whitney was what kept him to some construct of normality during that period where Linda was away looking after Elaine. And then of course she battled cervical cancer off screen, and I think that that story in particular, it wasn't my favourite, because I feel like it went against the characters of Mick and Linda, and especially what it didn't go for what Dominic Treadwell Collins had written them to be. Of course, he had no say because he'd left the role of executive producer by then, but it went against the source material of Mick and Linda, which of course the source material was Dominic Treadwell Collins' parents. Who a completely loyal couple who have been together for years, and I feel like that storyline just kind of forgotten that. And of course, I feel like it's a bit strong to call it an affair. I feel like it was more of a lost love triangle, if that makes sense. Like I said, I don't really like that story. That's definitely my least favourite story that the Carters have done. I think that story was very much against what the Carters stand for as characters. I would even argue that the Linda and Max arc was also another one of those, but that had a little bit more ground to it based on the context and on what caused Linda to have an affair, and more specifically what she didn't know. So yeah, I do feel like the cheating aspects were very much not so good, but the performances were what sold me on the fact that, you know, Mick was struggling here, Linda was struggling here. Danny Dyer and Kelly Bright, I must say, are the modern day Anita Dobson and Leslie Grantham. They are truly standout actors, and I do think they have the best TV coupling in soap. They are the best TV coupling. I think obviously we've had iconic ones like you know, Kat and Alfie, and of course Phil and Sharon, and you know, Max and Tanya, and all these different TV couplings I feel like have been really good, but at the same time they've also not quite hit the same mark as what Mick or what Danny Dyer and Kelly Bright achieved with Mick and Linda Carter. Another way they also broke the soap mold was they never had Mick kill anyone. Obviously they'd never had Phil do that either. A lot of characters haven't killed anyone, but in the times where it was most possible that someone could die, they didn't. And the two examples I have by that are of course Dean Wicks and Stuart Highway. Neither character were killed off. Of course Stuart went on to have a redemption arc, and then of course he left the square with Rainey. But Dean, that New Year episode could have easily, or Mick and Linda's wedding could have easily had a different turn where Dean died at the bottom of the lake and Mick couldn't save him. But they didn't go down that route. They had Mick. They had a huge moment for Mick where of course he came to terms with the fact that Dean is his brother, despite what he'd done to the love of his life. And he thought, you know, do you know what? You're my brother. I'm not doing this to our mum. I'm going to save you. I do feel like that a Mick and Dean reunion would be fascinating to watch, you know, nearly 10 years after that storyline. I genuinely would love to see a reunion between Mick Carter and Dean Wicks. I doubt it will happen, but at the same time I think it'll be excellent to do. But mostly with Dominic Treadwell Collins as an executive producer again. I feel like that'll be a very big step for him. To reunite those two characters. Also, with Mick as a character, kind of changed the soap scene as well with the Stuart feud. I think what I mean by that is, you know, it was a very straightforward feud, and that's what I loved about it. There wasn't this complex rubbish like we've seen with a lot of the Phil feuds. The Phil Mitchell feuds I think are either a hit and miss. For me, I love the more personally driven ones. Apart from Phil and Keeble from this year, I thought that was quite crap in my opinion. But Mick versus Stuart was very simple to understand. You know, these two are childhood friends, and when Mick got his life in track, Stuart didn't, and that Stuart's jealousy drove him to making the Carters' lives live in hell. And I feel like it was an excellent story, and to this day it's probably my second favourite storyline from the Carter family. I do want to go over my favourite story of all time here, and that is Mick Carter's sexual abuse story. This was probably one of the first... This was the first original plot of EastEnders post-COVID or post-lockdown. This was the first new storyline that EastEnders had truly set up, and in my opinion it holds its own as its best story. The way that it was delivered, the way it was written was beautiful, even though of course Linda did have an affair with Max. I still think this story still stands out as the best story EastEnders have ever done. The timing of this story as well is also very personal to me. This storyline began in 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. It was a very dark year. It was a very horrible year for the entire world. I, like absolutely thousands of others, did succumb to a very horrible battle with depression. And this storyline very much took my favourite character down a very similar path I was going. Just to put it out there, I've never been through sexual abuse. I just want to put that out. Never been through that, so I don't want to portray myself as if I have. But the mental health aspect of this story and seeing the decline of Mick's ability, communication, was not only heartbreaking but incredibly personal to watch. This is something that I'd also been, this aspect of the story I'd also been through, where I lost communication with the people I could talk to the most. I couldn't open up, I couldn't do it, and I truly think that... Oh no. I did submit it. I did send it. Sorry about this. I sent it. I did send it, so that's a bit bad. Sorry. I'll sort it out a bit. Sorry about that. This story, I wanted to just, it was very personal, because as Mick was battling through his demons, I was battling through mine. And the penultimate episode to New Year, December 31st, 2020, we saw Mick basically contemplate taking his own life, and this was around the time where I was at my absolute lowest, and seeing Mick work through that and finally admit to himself what was wrong was such a powerful and beautiful scene, and was very much marked the first time I'd ever cried watching EastEnders. I've been emotional watching it, but I never cried as much as I have watching these episodes. And of course, that leads me to talk about the New Year's Day special, the hour-long episode where Mick Carter confronted Katie Lewis, his abuser. He took back the power that he had once lost, and he finally told her how it was. She no longer let her gaslight. He no longer She no longer She could no longer manipulate him. She no longer could gaslight him, because he took back that power and he told her straight. And also, Danny Dyer was that committed to doing this story right. He, Kelly Bright, and Simone. I can't remember the. Oh, she's such a good actor, and I can't remember her. I feel awful for that. They shielded together. He took time out with his own family, and they shielded together to basically protect each other from the virus, so that they could deliver this story right. And let me tell you now, that was such an incredible thing to do, and they truly knocked it out of the park. This is, during arguably the height of COVID. It come back for round 2, and the actors were, of course, they had to carry on as they were, with the social distance acting, and the way they did it was just remarkable. And the more standout scene of the episode for me was actually Mick telling Linda. That's where I broke down the most. That scene to this day is without a doubt my favourite scene on EastEnders. I can't say any different. It was beautiful. We've had many other moments that brought me to tears after that. Nancy coming back, Mick accepting Frankie as his daughter, which also Mick and I'll get to that. Mick's fatherhood, his arc as a dad, I think is I'll get to that. But that scene when Mick told Linda about his past, for me, forever changed the way I looked at EastEnders, because they took something so sensitive and they did it in such a true and honest way. And this was, for me, the most personal, because that's exactly what I did. I opened up about stuff that was haunting me, and don't get me wrong, it took me a while to really get help. In fact, the timing is that obscene. I'll finish this point and I'll expand on that one. It was so true to survivors of sexual abuse, and I think the way Danny Dyer, he didn't do this story to get awards. He did this story to start a conversation about male survivors, and I think that EastEnders have done an excellent job since this story in giving a platform to men who have survived sexual abuse and sexual assault. It's such an important thing to consider. I can't dismiss the amazing work of the likes of Jesse Wallace, Lacey Turner, Kelly Bright, Maisie Smith, Louise Litton, who have done, of course, rape storylines, and also child abuse storylines. I can't dismiss the incredible talent of the women who have, of course, delivered these storylines, but at the same time it's very much a different conversation for male survivors as it is for women. It shouldn't be, it really shouldn't, but that's just the way it is. So to see the authenticity and the sincerity of this arc, I think, was truly fantastic, and I cannot stress how happy I was to see Mick finally open up to Linda and finally stand up to his abuser. I think it was such a powerful and incredibly done scene, and Danny Dyer, it does annoy me that he didn't get an award for that scene, but at the same time, he wasn't out to get an award. He was out to do some good, and he did. He really did. Now, as I was saying before, when I was dealing with my personal battle with mental health, it all very much came to a head when I finally opened up about some things that had happened. Oh, that's the lighthouse. And I had basically gone and done some pretty bad things, and I finally opened up. And of course, when you're a kid and when you're a teenager under the age of 18 and you're seen in danger, people get involved. It gets made official. And the day I had opened up to professionals and the urgent referrals were put in place, that was when Mick and the Carter family went to court. And that episode was absolutely breathtaking, because it brought back the classic Mick Carter, and unfortunately it brought him back for one of the last times he had on the show. That scene where Mick finally got justice, he didn't get to read it out himself, but his victim statement was absolutely gorgeous. The writing of that statement was just incredible through every single aspect. It was just incredible. In particular, I believe Mick's his I forget the thing that prevented him from obviously saying the words himself was very in line with his character. Of course, Mick wanted to take back, he wanted to tell Katie as it was, tell her straight that she did this to him, this is how it made him feel, and that was very in line with Mick's character. He's a confrontational person for the best of reasons, but the thing that prevented him from obviously doing so was very in line with his character as well, probably more in line than the confrontational aspect. And that's Mick's role as a father. Obviously Nancy had a seizure, so Mick went to go look after her, and just say the dad. He just carried on being a dad. He put his vendetta aside. He put his need for retribution aside, and he went to go help his baby girl. And with that, he supported Frankie in her doing the character reference for Katie. He backed his other daughter on that, for not so much defending his abuser, but at the same time staying true to herself. He supported her for that, and that is such a Mick thing to do. I think this character in particular has stood out as the most selfless character on the square. I think this storyline cemented Mick as the best father on the square, going back to, of course, what Mick did for Johnny, or what Mick said to Johnny when Johnny come out. There have been some times where Mick hasn't been as good. I believe it's more of a writing issue though. For example, when Lee came out as depressed, I think Mick was a little bit dismissive in some areas, but Mick started to understand it more after going through it himself, which is a very common thing for men. So I think that if Mick and Lee were to interact now, the dynamic would be very different. In fact, the dynamic was different after Lee returned, or when Lee came back for the suicide episode, the big one, the penultimate one before the New Year episode. So yeah, that's 15 minutes spent on talking about Mick's sexual abuse storyline. I'm going to reply to someone right now because we're literally having a discussion on Mick, which I think is very interesting as we do the stream. Following on from, I did talk about how I wasn't a big fan of the whole Mick and Janine arc, but then how Mick's exit very much rectified that with the fact that Mick was simply just lying to himself. I feel like the sexual abuse storyline very much planted the seeds for Mick's departure, which is why I believe that they did that story. I think they did that story knowing that after that, Danny would want out. I think that was a very smart decision by EastEnders. They could have actually, I'm glad they didn't, because it meant we got to spend another year with Mick. But they could have made the sexual abuse story his final one, and see it after. And instead of rebuying the Vic, they move away and they start as a family. But they didn't do that, and I'm glad, because we got to spend another year of the Carters. And of course, we still have Linda and Shirley left on the show, which I think is a very smart decision from EastEnders to make. Also in consideration with this story, it very much does serve a new action-y based chapter. It's we've all heard what Danny Dyer's comments on the Mo Gilligan show, with him not wanting to come back, and that's absolutely fair. He just left the role, and people are already asking him. I feel like we all need to take into account what Mick said a year ago, practically a year ago today, a year ago from tomorrow, Sunday the 8th of January, when the day that Mick's exit was announced. Danny Dyer himself had said he wanted the door to be left open, but he also said he wanted to move on as well. Bit of a contradiction there, of course, but at the same time I feel like it just comes naturally to anyone who decides to leave a job. They want the door left open to maybe come back. So, as we have not currently seen a body, and it's it's being labelled as Mick's disappearance and not his death, I believe that it is very open for Mick to possibly come back. However, we need to think about, well, why would he not come back for Linda? All throughout this year, we've been hearing a very common point from Mick, a very recurring point, and that is how he is not he's not doing okay mentally. He's much better than he was during, you know, the sexual abuse storyline. That's without saying. You know, he's had some bright laughs. You know, he got back together with Linda. He got to start a relationship with his daughter. There's so many things to take into account, but at the same time, Mick has not managed to seek out not only the trauma of his childhood, but his trauma from Walford. You know, in 9 years, this man went from his wife was raped. He found out his entire life was a lie. He lost a pub. He lost his home. He has suffered. This character has suffered. So I personally think it's only natural to walk away for a bit. Alright, yeah, not telling Linda that he's alive is probably a bad way to start, but at the same time, what if he's washed up somewhere? Or what if he's been captured? You know, the Walking Dead's just done it with Rick Grimes, well, not just done it, it was about 4 years ago, but Rick Grimes is now, Andrew Lincoln's now reprising his role again as Rick Grimes, probably for the last time as well, you know, I hate to say it, but it's most likely the case. I think it's safe to consider that Danny Dyer wanted an open exit where he could come back, but at the same time not go out in a black cab. You know, this year we've had a load of black cab exits. We've had of course Nancy, we've had Rainey, Dottie. A lot of characters have left in a black cab or on the tube, which makes me believe that, you know, they could come back. Nancy has made a second stint. You know, she's finished a second stint. She could come back for a third. You know, you never know. I feel like it's safe to consider that if Danny Dyer ever does decide to return, then it will be one heck of a story. And if the producer can get it right, hopefully one heck of a justification as to why he hasn't already. You know, this could have easily been done as a Danny Dyer break story instead of a Danny Dyer exit, where they write him out temporarily to make everyone speculate that he's either dead or what, and then he comes back and epic boom. But this is an exit story, so it's to be considered that he's not coming back. Because why would you tell everyone you're leaving for a whole year, build up hype and speculation as to how you're going to leave, and then boom, you're just gonna, you know, just say you're coming back? Andrew Lincoln did that with the movies, but that was different because it was a departure, of course, until we saw him return in the series finale, but at the same time it was also a stepping off point. So he'd left the show, but he'd also decided, you know, he went off and did other things, which is exactly what Danny Dyer is doing right now. He's doing other things. He's doing things that, you know, he's revisiting the landscape of the industry. He might come back, he might not. It comes down to him at the end of the day. If EastEnders offers him a good contract, you know, and the thing is, I don't think he'll ever come back as a full-time regular again. I don't see that being a possibility. I think what is likely the case is that Danny Dyer would come back for a couple of episodes, confirm his fate, and then he'd go again, because I believe once you leave Walford once, when you leave Walford once, there's always that area where you're probably going to want to go again, because you won't want to become a full-time regular again. You know, that makes me quite confident that a lot of the actors that have recently returned won't be sticking around for a long time, because that's normally the case. You know, Alfie Moon has been playing, you know, Shane Ritchie's been playing Alfie on and off for 20 years. I hope he doesn't leave anytime soon, because I love Alfie, but at the same time I'm there, like, you know, it's to be expected at this point. I believe when actors have become very comfortable in balancing out different roles, it's almost certain that they are going to depart again. So yeah, I must say that the way that this character has been written has very much been a huge part of my childhood. You know, the second half of my childhood, so for the last 7 years of it, well, actually 6 years of it, I very much, you know, I grew up watching Mick Carter. Every EastEnders fan has their landlord and landlady. You know, kids from the 80s obviously grew up with Den and Angie. Kids from the early 90s, it was Frank Butcher and Pat Evans. Mid 90s, it was, you know, the Mitchells. 2000s, it was you know, Cat and Alfie. 2010s, it was Mick and Linda Carter. And I started watching in the 2010s, so my EastEnders, you know, landlord and landlady will always be Mick and Linda Carter. And lo and behold, at this current moment, Linda is still the landlady of the Vic, so my childhood landlady's still there. Obviously, during my time as an EastEnders fan, there have been other, you know, there's been one other landlady called Sharon Watts. And it's just been, it's been surreal, honestly. Mick Carter will always be my favourite landlord, and just favourite character altogether. Right, this stream's gonna get striked, I reckon, because I've forgotten to turn off that music there. Sorry about that. But yeah, this scene, or this character, I think, has stood out as a landlord, stood out as a character, and I genuinely think that EastEnders, it won't be the same without Danny Dyer, but at the same time, I think it's more of a stepping off point until Danny Dyer either comes back by choice, or he is offered a decent salary to make a few one-off appearances. I for one think if we do see Mick at all, it will be for the 40th anniversary. So stepping on from 3 years post his exit, I feel like then will be probably the most fitting time to probably do something, maybe just a one-off scene where Mick is standing in the shadows, or he gets a scene with Linda, kind of similar to what Ian Beale had as well with his return to EastEnders this year, with last year for Dot's funeral. Yeah, I can't lie. I think if it does happen, it will be the 40th. Like I said earlier, the Carters have been central to the 30th anniversary storylines, and of course the 35th anniversary. Haven't been the only characters who have been central. There have been several arcs scattered throughout the 40th anniversary story. No, sorry, the 30th and 35th. For me, I think the Carters have had the best ones. 35th one, I can't lie. Seeing Ben finally beat up Keanu was very good. Yeah, and not to mention as well, in terms of hardmen, EastEnders hardmen, I think Mick is one of the toughest characters to ever really enter the soap. Which, you know, there've been a lot of tough, you know, Phil Mitchell, Grant Mitchell, Jack Brannan, Sean Slater, Dan Sullivan, Jake Moon, Danny Moon, Owen Turner. There are so many EastEnders hardmen, where a lot of people put Mick in the top 10, bottom top 10, which is fair. It's a fair thing to say. I can't lie though, I think Mick is a lot tougher than some of the people I mentioned. I'm not saying he's tougher than Grant. Hell, at this point, I should say he's tougher than Phil, but the writers would never have that. If Mick and Phil ever did come to blows in a full-on fight, I guarantee Mick should have landed a few good punches, but ultimately the writers and their obsession with making Phil Mitchell look invincible, Phil will probably win. And I can't lie, you know, I would have loved to have, at one point throughout 9 years, see Mick and Phil exchange punches, but at the same time, I'm glad, because that would have just been classic Danny Dyer, you know, seeing a hard man. That's originally why Danny Dyer turned down the role of Carl White, which I think is a insane, absolutely insane if you think about it, because Danny Dyer could have been on EastEnders a lot earlier, but no, he turned it down until he found out what the iconic or the ideal role for him was going to be, and I just loved it. I loved it wholeheartedly. I thought it was freaking fantastic. And yeah, but as a hard man, I feel like Mick truly has had some very good feats. You know, he's beaten up 3 burglars in one go. He's fought back against the kidnapper. Alright, yeah, he got snatched in the end, but at the same time, you know, he still put up a fight. He survived prison. He broke someone's fingers in prison. He beat the crap out of someone in a boxing ring. Alright, there's a little bit of foul play there, because he literally just grabbed him and then started beating the crap out of him, but at the same time, Mick is very much a character. He's like the Hulk, where the more you hit the Hulk, the angrier he gets and the more dangerous he becomes. I think Mick is very along those lines, where you can land a punch on Mick, but that's probably one of the only ones you're gonna get, unless he's playing mind games with you. And that was very much the case with Aidan Maguire, because Aidan beat up Mick quite badly, but Mick, you know, Mick fought. He didn't fight back because he knew one punch from him, it would have been lights out for Aidan, and that wouldn't have made the matters any better in that situation. Mick won with wisdom and Mick won that feud with wisdom and with class. But you know, Mick's taken beatings. He's been slapped. He's been punched. He's been shot. You know, he's been shot. He's been smashed with a rock. Dean tried to drown him. Mick is a freaking tough guy. He's such a badass, honestly. He's just been. He's probably one of the strongest characters. I think throughout his 9-year run, I believe he was probably the 3rd strongest character on EastEnders for his entire run. People say that he wasn't as strong as Vincent Hubbard. I beg to differ, because Vincent didn't really have many. Alright, yeah, he fought off against a few. He punched one attacker, and then he got beaten up. I believe Vincent was an overrated hard man, if I'm honest with you. He got one lucky punch on Phil. Well, he got one good punch on Phil, and I think That's all you can say for Vincent, really. Jack Brannan's had some better feats. I believe Jack Brannan is definitely amongst one of, if not the hardest character on the square. But no, I think, you know, Danny Dyer's Mick Carter is the best character. He's well-rounded. He's had, in my opinion, the best fights. He's had the best storylines, the best chemistry with his fellow co-stars, and in my opinion, he's had the best. He's had the best in audience impact as well. You know, people have connected with this character and invested in Mick Carter, and that goes without saying that a lot of people I know who hated EastEnders, who took the mick out of me, get it? Sorry. Who, you know, teased me for watching EastEnders, they now watch it themselves because of Mick Carter, because of Danny Dyer's performance. You know, he's brought in thousands upon thousands of newer and younger viewers, and that's because he's a character that people understand, and I think that's what makes him such an iconic character. He, in my opinion, has the best backstory. He has the most, you know, the entire Carter family backstory could get its own mini-series in itself. You know, I believe it could easily get 5-6 years as like a mini, you know, BBC iPlayer only series. Honest to God, I think the way that they've written the Carter's backstory, from Shirley giving birth at 14 to the whole baby farming story, to, of course, Shirley's abuse from Sylvie, or, you know, Mick's sexual abuse, Mick and Linda having Lee at 14, the Carter's upbringing, Linda's bulimia, so many amazing stories. Just, yeah, they are, in my opinion, the most well done characters on the square, and Mick is the best. Talking about, obviously, the rest of the Carter family, they've been fantastic. I was absolutely heartbroken when Maddie Hill left again, because what I was really hoping was that after Mick's exit, both Maddie Hill and Rose Ayling Ellis took on as the new owners of the Vic, because that would be the first time where massively younger characters took on the Vic, because we've not really had that before. Obviously they're both in their 30s, and that's not radically young, but at the same time they're still growing, still experiencing life, and I would have loved to see them take on the Vic. Now they've both left, and I'm a bit disappointed with the way that EastEnders team failed to accommodate Rose. It's made me very doubtful that she will return, which breaks my heart, because she left in such a standout way, taking on the Carter identity, because she is a Carter. She's the daughter of Mick Carter, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved that little touch to Frankie's exit, but at the same time, you know, I really do hope that the Carter kids return one day, because I feel like you know, there's only two left. We're back to the pre-2013 days where it was just Shirley, and now Shirley's gone for a bit, Linda's gone for a bit. There are no Carters on the square. I would love it if Linda returns with a couple of surprise you know, if not Nancy and Frankie, maybe Lee and Johnny. I think especially Johnny. Out of all the Linda's kids, she's always had the closest bond with Johnny. I feel like through her grieving process, it would be brilliant to have her son grieve with her and just work together on getting the Vic back on, And without any disrespect, as an actor myself, I don't like to discredit other actors' performances. I would prefer it if they do bring back Sam Strike's version of the character. I don't know if he would go back to soap based on the current feats he's made and the things he's done. But at the same time, I'd like to see I would like to see Sam Strike's version of Johnny come back to EastEnders. I feel like he was just fantastic. He was such a good actor, and going back to the scene I was talking about with the second time I've come back to it, but his coming out scene, I feel like it was incredible. And there's stuff for Johnny to do on the square as well, and get him more involved. I think my only problem with the Carter kids is that they've always been side characters in Mick and Linda's story, which in a sense they kind of have been. It's like having a lot of the core MCU characters who are now getting their own stuff, like WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, who have been very big and standout characters, but they've only really just been sticked in here and there. The only Carter that really did get his own big story was Lee, only Carter kid, and obviously Frankie got hers at the end with the sexual assault story, which was really well done. But I believe that we should be getting storylines like Johnny Carter becoming the Square's next major lawyer, getting things like Lee taking over as the new landlord of the Vic, and even seeing Nancy and Frankie come back. I might not be for. I think hopefully next year we can get at least one of Mick's daughters back on the Square. Nancy's my favourite female character on EastEnders, so I would prefer it if it was her, but at the same time I adore Frankie. She's actually adorable. Frankie's character is so sweet, and I can't help but love her, so I'd be happy if any of the Mick's daughters came back. I feel like they're needed. EastEnders took a risk keeping Linda on without without Mick. I feel like there was that anxiety for Kelly Bright, thinking she was going to lose her job because of course Danny's decided to bow out. So going forward, I personally think that Linda, she needs a network around her, and she's not interested in another love interest. So hopefully we just see more of her family around. Don't do the whole secret brother thing, because I just did that with Sharon and Zach. But no, honestly, I'd love to see things like Nancy and Zach, Lee and Whitney, just the four of them. I feel like it'd be a very awkward situation if all four of them were in a room together. Bear in mind that two are siblings and the others are both exes of the siblings. But at the same time, I think it would be really good. It would be very good to have both characters just really, or both units just really. Oh wow, that was quite big. Yeah, I think it'd be brilliant. Just make them as standout characters. I'd love to see more. Imagine a Lee versus Keanu feud, or Lee and it's just loads. There's loads of stories they could do with the Carter kids, and they're not even kids. They're not. They're 30. I think Johnny's the youngest of the older ones. But no, I think it'll be great to see them all back, even if it's just for a bit. I think the only permanent return I want to see at this current moment is probably Johnny. Danny Boy Hatchard, I don't think is fully committed to coming back full time yet. I don't even think he'd come back at all, but I just really hope that some of them will, if not all of them. I think Lee could also be a very good father figure to Ollie as well. Bear in mind how close Mick was with Ollie, and how, you know, Ollie lived with Mick full time, and that routine's just been shattered. So, you know, it would be great seeing Lee and Ollie interact more. But I would also like to get to know a bit more on Linda's side of the family as well. I'd like to see Elaine come back. I would love to see Elaine come back to EastEnders. I think the actress who played Elaine was sensational. She also played Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd, which is my favourite musical. So I'd love to see a little reference to that here and somewhere. I think it'd be really, really funny. You know, I think it'd be awesome. But yeah, there's loads of characters. There's loads of characters related to the Carters I'd love to see come back for on-off appearances. You know, Elaine, Linda's children, Frankie. No, at this point I think Frankie also classes as one of Linda's kids. You know, Jar Jar as well. Give Shirley some more to do as well. I feel like she should reunite with Jar Jar. That would be a very good scene. And yeah, just have them grieve over Tina and grieve over Mick. Especially bring back Carly Wicks. I think it'll be a very good thing to do. Just to give a bit of purpose back to Carly. Or back to Shirley, sorry. And yeah, that's round about everything I wanted to say this stream. You know, Mick, Danny Dyer, Mick Carter, I want to say thank you again for, obviously I'm saying this if he's watching, he's not, but thank you again for 9 years of just absolute joy, and we will miss you, mate.